Good morning. This is the Sunset Church of Christ vision. It's short and sweet, obviously, and we like to leave a little bit for your imagination. I think it got cut off here, so I'm sorry about that. I'm here this morning to speak with you, share with you a little bit, wearing my hat of the Sunset Church Mission Coordinator. I serve on the Mission Committee of the Sunset Church of Christ, as well as being the Dean of Missions here. So sometimes those kind of cross and interweave together, but I want to share with you primarily a little bit about what the Sunset Church of Christ is doing in terms of mission. And as you can imagine, as you all know, we have a very rich missions history, and the Lord has blessed us in many ways in many parts of the world. And the school was born here at this church. That means the school, God has blessed to go around the world and do many different things, and many, many fine brothers and sisters have gone through here and then left here and gone to different places. But also bear in mind that there was a church body here, a family that began in 1955, I believe, 1952, 1955, when this church started as a church plant itself. Men and women of passion, of vision to see Lubbock evangelized. And the church grew over the years to what we have today. And so church and school have worked together and been in partnership, and one separating it from the other becomes very difficult when you get to live and work and move in and out and around this place. And so we've been greatly blessed. And these flags, many people coming through here have gone to these countries. I want to talk to you a little bit about a recent journey we've kind of been on. Well, is it frozen? Or is it, do you know, Matt? I'm not shooting right, not aiming correctly. See? Oh. Okay, advance. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about where we are, kind of what we're doing on the Sunset Missions. We have a Sunset Sunday, a Mission Sunday, every fall. Usually falls the first weekend in October. Many of you were here for that this past year. And we challenged the Sunset Church of Christ on that day to give all the monies that we're going to use for missions in that year. And our budget of this last year was about $259,000, $260,000. And the Sunset Church of Christ gave about $274,000, $276,000. That's sort of typical around this place, that the challenge, every year we add a little more, challenge a little more, and they give beyond it. And so we're left to go, what do we do with this extra? That's the heart of the Sunset congregation. They love to give toward missions. And many Sunset members are involved in missions. They're going in different places all over the world, but they're also giving to different things. So the Sunset Mission Sunday represents what we give for the mission efforts that we've focused on and decided we're going to work with, but also Sunset members, Sunset classes, give to different mission works. And so there's a lot of missions being supported out of this church. Right now, here's where we are with our Aimers. We've got Aimers in Brazil and Honduras and Colorado. We've got some Aimers preparing to go to different places. Nathan Clark will be heading out this May. And then Abigail Wilson is preparing to go to Honduras. So Nathan and Abigail will be leaving here in just a few weeks. Those are our Sunset Aimers. If you'd advance, Matt. We also support mission works in 3 different areas, primarily Mexico, New Zealand, and Egypt. And I want to tell you a little bit about David and Olivia Nelson. They just recently finished 6 years of working in Kharkov, Ukraine. And finishing that 6-year commitment, they came home, spent some time thinking and dreaming and praying about the future. And they're going to go back and work in Tauranga, New Zealand. They're going to be working with the Southwest Bible College. Did I get that right? South Pacific. I knew that didn't sound right. South Pacific Bible College, the Otamotai congregation, and many congregations in New Zealand. They have a vision of working with those churches to grow and expand the kingdom and plant new churches in New Zealand. And what I like about this family, a lot of things I like about this family, but Olivia Nelson grew up here. Her father is an elder in the Sunset Church. Both of these guys, Olivia went through Ames, did her AIM time in New Zealand, and there's where she met David, whose parents are missionaries, were missionaries and are missionaries in New Zealand. And so you see a lot of mission emphasis in these young people's lives from the time they were very young all the way up. They get married. They go on their first mission adventure in Kharkov, Ukraine, and now they're beginning their second. Long-term, lifelong missionaries is what we're kind of seeing in these guys. Great family. We're very excited about what they're going to be going and doing there. Advance, please. And then we have the Peters, Cherries, and Ely families who are working in Auckland, New Zealand. Now, these guys started a new church plant in New Zealand about 6.5 years ago. And during that time, they've reached young families primarily, which is sort of a rarity in that culture, in that place. They have been asked by other churches in New Zealand to come and talk to them and share with them, how do you do outreach? How do you do evangelism here? Y'all have been effective, and they are recognized for that. And so they're being sought out for that. And they're now in a stage in that work, which is about 5.5, 6 years old, where they're preparing leaders for the next generation to be able to go on and be independent, and they're looking at when do we work our way out. They're looking at another 6-year commitment, at least by Elijah Peters, and he's sponsored by the Sunset Church, and all these missionary families are supported by Sunset. So we're very proud and very excited about these families. If you would advance, please. This is Alfred and Hala Habashi. They work in Cairo, Egypt, and their situation is a very challenging one. They have a new president there now, and he's working hard for reform, but I just talked to Alfred 2 mornings ago. He said, Paul, there are bombs going off every day, everywhere. And our regular practice every morning is to pray, Lord, bring us home safely tonight. And they send the kids out to school, and Alfred goes out and evangelizes. He's studying with 4 Islamic Muslim people right now in secret in places where they can hide sort of and have a Bible study. They've passed out 10,000 Bibles in 10 days. Here's how that looks like. You know, when we went to Mexico City and we handed out these booklets, the good news in Spanish, everybody took them. Yes, thank you. Nobody cared that anybody was taking them. And that was great. They were eager, they took it, you'd see people reading it, and our guys did a great job of following up and having conversations. But with Alfred, it's just a little bit different. With Alfred, they've got a building there on the street in the main center of Cairo. People walking by, if they come into the building area, and Alfred and them have a little fair and kind of invite people to come in and look at things, they'll come in, and inside of there, they can hand them a Bible. And they take it like this. A lot of times, he says. And they go. Taking a Bible is risky. Alfred cannot evangelize legally in Cairo. He can evangelize and study the Bible there where the church building is located, but he can't go out and do that openly. He's been interrogated pretty roughly within the last year, faces a lot of challenges. But this brother lives with hope and faith and confidence, with great character and perseverance every single day. He also makes a trip up to Athens and preaches there in the Bible school Sunset has. He and his father reach out to some communities of believers who have come from different parts of the Muslim world, escaping the conflict there. They land in Athens, and they'll share, Alfred and his father will go and visit and preach with these groups every time they go. And every time they go and do that, they've had some baptisms. So this brother is influential in many places. He's using home Bible studies and radio program and passing out New Testaments. Would you advance, please? And then we have Lalo and Jamie Rocha and Israel and Nelly Molina working in Mexico City, Mexico. And we have Ricardo Reyes and his family are working with a church in Cuernavaca. So we're kind of spread out in these different areas. A couple of years ago, kind of when I made my second year as working with the mission committee here at Sunset, other members on that committee are Kevin and Charles and Patrick Schaefer and Tom Kunis and Steve Crockett and Todd Davis. And we kind of began to ask ourselves, and we were challenged by the elders to do so, let's look at our history of mission work. Let's ask, where have we been? Let's look at where we are currently and ask, what are we doing? And then let's just ask again, where should we go and what should we be doing? What is the Great Commission? What's God called us to do, and how has He told us to do that? And who are we as Sunset? And so we kind of sit down, Kevin and I read through the book of Acts and the Gospels and just started talking down, writing down some things we saw about, here's kind of how God examples or tells us how to do mission. And you can carry out those biblical principles of mission anywhere in the world. And we made a note of those. And then we began to look and say, well, now where? And the Great Commission, as we looked at it all through Scripture, said everywhere. All nations, languages, tribes. So how do we choose where? He says go wherever there are people, but how do we choose where? And then we began to ask, and who are we as Sunset? And we kind of saw, God calls us to take the gospel to the nations. He also calls us to be good stewards. And He also says that each of us are uniquely designed and placed in the body exactly how He wants us to be. And so we begin to look and go, Sunset is a church plant in Lubbock, Texas. SIBI is a vision of how to take the gospel to the world. At SIBI, there are aimers, young missionaries, go out, share that gospel, and work with experienced, mature missionaries, and they grow up and they return back home and they serve on mission committees and they serve as elders and they sometimes serve as long-term missionaries. SIBI is a school that prepares men and women alike to know the foundations of God's Word and to share those with others. And then the deaf program does the same, reaching out to the deaf of the world. Same, and on and on. God has given us some great resources here at Sunset. And so we begin to ask, well, how can we bring all of those together? How can we be a good steward of what God has given us with these kingdom resources to take the gospel around the world? But we begin to ask, where can we do that in a focused way? Would you advance, please? So if we're in Mexico, Egypt, and New Zealand, where can we and how can we bring AIM and SAME and SIBI and School of Missions, and how can we bring it all together and focus it in one place for the benefit and blessing of the lost there, grow a healthy, strong, mature congregation, and perhaps see that congregation become what Sunset has sort of become here? There are graduates in 113 different countries of the world preaching the gospel, many here in the States, many in foreign fields. This little place in Lubbock, Texas, this church with a mission, heart, and passion has influenced many different places around the world. Cannot a little church in a little Lubbock, Texas, in a Spanish world, in an African world, in a European world, not have that same kind of an influence? And so, can we plant some strong mother church that can be an influence and send out more and more people in its specific country? Not necessarily a brand new thought at that particular time, just maybe a refining of one that we've always sort of believed in. But I think that's what was so strong and encouraging for us. This was coming out of who we are, who God has made us to be. So we look at Adventures in Missions, a 2-year Bible and ministry program here at SIBI, School of Missions, deaf ministry training, international schools, and we said, where can we begin to put all these pieces of the puzzle into place in one place? And the thought came to us about Mexico City. Mexico City, since the 1980s, when Klein first went down there, Klein Payton, and purchased a house, he purchased it with the idea that potential missionaries of the future would come, stay in that house, get a picture, an idea, and an impact of the city and the lostness of that city, and come back. And it wasn't just any city. Mexico City is the second largest city in the world, and it has a strong, powerful influence in Latin America. The center of Catholicism for Latin America is in Mexico City. And so that was 1980. We have the Pink House there in Mexico City. Mission team went down of 7 families back in the early 1990s, late 1980s. Terry could tell me specific. Late 80s. And they planted a church there right in the center of the city. And they had a building that they were able to purchase. And that church is located about half a block from a major avenue in Mexico City. 1 million people pass by on that avenue every day. And you can look down the street and see the building off there to the side. So it's centrally located. There's 2 physical assets that God has given us to use for His kingdom work. But what about the people resources? You'd advance, please. Lalo Rocha, under church planning category there in Israel Molina, we began to visit with them about a vision of working in Mexico City and building a strong, mature congregation there. Lalo was one of the young children who was part of that congregation that was planted by that mission team in the late 80s. Grew up there, later worked in different places in different ministries, met his wife Jamie, who went through AIM, and they decided they wanted to do mission work long-term in Mexico City. They went down in 2010 and began to work with that church there in the center of Mexico City. Israel and Nelly Molina. Israel went to the Quito School of Preaching and Sunset Associate School in Quito, Ecuador. Graduated from there, came to Mexico City, worked as an apprentice missionary there with some missionaries, and met and converted his wife Nelly. They later then worked with a team to start a church in the southern part of Mexico City, in Tlapan. And Israel has about 10 years of church planting experience. He's an evangelist and is always talking with people. Mercy shower, loves people, can connect with them where they are, no matter where they are. When we went down this past week with our group down to Mexico City, we were kind of sitting there waiting for about 45 minutes while Israel is opening up his Bible and sharing and speaking and talking with somebody we'd met there in a park. That's kind of his normal everyday practice. Lalo is an administrator and a disciple maker. He loves to bring people from a new convert in Christ to a mature, active member of the body of Christ. And so he and Israel have been working with that church since 2010, and it has grown. It's grown to about 100 members today. Well, we began to see that over the years, as Amers come through and pass through Mexico City, many of them for a short-term trip, and then they're going to go out and go to different fields in which they're going to serve. But they always talk about this Mexico City trip, how it's impacted them, how it opens their eyes to the lost. It's a good key influence and part of their training, of their growth, of their preparing for where they're going to go and serve. So what if we had full-time AIM coordinators to help make that experience even richer? What if we had full-time AIM coordinators in Mexico City to advance and grow the AIM program there in terms of more teams coming down and larger teams there? What if AIMers could enter into a mature, experienced work of years and be able to see and be able to learn from those experienced missionaries, but then also be involved in some new church plants as it goes and grows? And so we went to Princeton and Danny Palmer, who did their AIM time when they were single in León, Mexico. Later they got married, and they've been here at Sunset, went through the 2-year program, went through the School of Missions, worked as AIM assistants. They know AIM, and they're ex-AIMers. And so they know where AIMers are at when they first come on the field, and they know where AIMers want to go and how they need to grow. And so I feel like we found the right people for the right place. They already speak Spanish. They already know the culture. And we're sending them down to join this team to work as full-time AIM coordinators. And there's the AIM piece of the puzzle coming into place. Deaf ministry, Mike and Kim Cantrell went down with us on a Mexico City trip, I guess 2 years ago, last year. And they went down with Dennis, and we had an idea of all going together and doing some different events and some different campaign type of work. But very quickly, the deaf started showing up, and because they heard Mike and Kim were there, and they're deaf. And they started asking questions, and Mike and Kim met Enrique, and with Enrique's help, and Mike and Kim working together, they began to study, and they went their own way. The hearing went one direction, the deaf went another direction. In Mexico City, there are about 1 million deaf people, and there's a small congregation of deaf people there that's meeting at the Hearing Church in the center of Mexico City. There are 3 movements of faith that do anything at all with the deaf, and that's it. It's a 32 million people city. When the deaf heard that Mike and Kim were there, they've made a couple of different trips. You'd have 18 to 25 people show up. That's without doing any kind of publicity or anything. And they were hungry for the Word, needing a gospel preacher in their language to share with them. And so in light of that, great opportunity that God's put before us. Enrique is here studying, going through the 3-year program. He has an intention of going back to his people and working with them. Mike and Kim went through the School of Missions, graduated in December, and they're now going to go back. They arrive April 24th. So they're almost there. And they're going to begin to work with the deaf congregation in Mexico City. Princeton and Danny are going to go next Tuesday. So they're almost there too. They're less than a week away. Jesus and Abby, I don't know if you guys know them. They've been with us for the last couple of years. They're from Mexico. And they've worked with the congregation there in Mexico City. And that congregation said, hey, these guys are pretty great. And they love the Lord and they want to serve in ministry. And so let's send them to Sunset. And man, we were all on board with that. Kevin and I got to go down and know them and on a trip, I guess 2 years ago as well, 3 years ago now. And they came here to Sunset and are preparing to go back and work with that church in the area of youth and family. So kind of bringing together different parts of what God has blessed us with into one place and focusing to take the gospel to and make an impact, a good foundation in Mexico City. There's also another great asset, kingdom resource, and that is the partners that help to support and sponsor these missionaries. There's the Cameron Church of Christ, who has come behind and helped support Mike and Kim in a huge way and making it possible for them to get there April 24th. Then there's the Granbury Church of Christ, who is a big supporter of Lalo's and some others on that team, and then also North A and Midland and Sunset. And these churches and the elders there and the mission committees there, we talk and we communicate and we go down and visit together. We've got our first scheduled everybody all at once visit to Mexico City for this coming fall. Partnership on this side, partnership on that side. And another key element in all of this are the Mexican brothers and sisters there in Mexico City who are doing a fabulous job of reaching out and loving each other and also of bringing in their family who don't know the Lord to where they can come to know who the Lord is. So many partnerships and connections on so many different levels. If you would advance, please. What's the future look like? It's kind of hard to tell when the words don't stay in the circles, but Mexico City, the building there in downtown, we've been able to remodel it as we've gone along and add some classrooms. Inside one of these classrooms is a satellite connection to the internet. Texas International Bible Institute is an all-Spanish associate of Sunset International Bible School, and they teach all of their courses in the Spanish language. And all their instructors are either missionaries to Latin America or are currently serving in Latin America themselves. So they offer these courses, and there are students who meet down in that building and study on a regular basis, working to get their 2-year degree. Lalo's looking at raising some scholarships for. There are already 2 families who want to do this and would love to start this fall or in January in that 2-year program full time. And in the future, we'd like to see, this is down the road, this is future stuff, that building be able to house and even and sponsor more students. So students, there's plans to grow the school. We also have a vision for seeing Mexican missionaries train and prepare to plant new churches. And they could train there in the school, but then they could also work in a practice internship there with that same work. And they could be involved in planning a new church plant even while they're involved in their classes. So you'd have learning and you'd have practicum going on at the same time. And then they'd be prepared to go out and start a new church in the city of their choice. At the same time, I have a vision for the future where those who want to work in Latin America, who are of American origin, like to plant a new church in South America somewhere, we could do the School of Missions in your preparation in Mexico City, in this location. Learning language, learning culture, learning strategy that has been effective and works there in Latin America, but learn all that in Latin America. So we're working and praying and moving forward in some of these directions, and we're just grateful to God for all the blessings that He's given us in that regard. One thing I want to read Acts 26, verse 17. It's a heavenly vision, is how I like to think of it, and it's when Jesus appears to Paul on the road to Damascus. And Jesus says to Paul, in a moment when Paul begins his grace-filled journey, a man with a lot of potential, a lot of giftedness, a lot of sin. And Christ comes to him. He's going to be saved. He's going to be transformed in that moment and in every moment after that into becoming more and more powerfully used by God to advance the kingdom. And Jesus says to him, I'm sending you to them to turn them from darkness to light, and from the power of Satan to God, that they may have and find the forgiveness of sins and be sanctified by faith in me. You don't turn from darkness to light. You don't get out of the power of Satan fully into the blessed power of God day and night. There are many challenges, and we've seen many challenges in this work and along this road. But the gospel, it turns out, is the thing that people need everywhere, in every place, every time. And we've seen many victories. I think the key in this work, as I was visiting with Lalo not long ago, he and I were talking, and we kind of came to this conclusion. Wherever there are men and women of godly character who persevere with biblical principles of mission in mind, persevere in sharing the gospel, and are committed to working together, the kingdom grows. And it grows in God's timing. God is faithful, and we can't do this without Him. These are great plans and great blessings and great resources. Without Him, none of it works. But we're not without Him. And so by the grace of God, we move forward.